Good morning, everyone.
And maybe one other one.
Our apologies, we've been dealing with some technical difficulties, but I think we've got it covered here. So we're ready to start our forum this morning. And this forum is kind of in tribute to Pastor Al Gertz, who is no longer with us physically, but in spirit he is with us because the God's Global Barnyard in December was always his passion. He always geared up for that during the year because he was committed to raising funds for that and educating people about that program, as well as ELCA World Hunger. So today we have with us Amanda White. She is not a pastor, we were told. Pastor Jay erred on that as he was giving us the information for that. But I think she passes here because she said she did go to seminary, so she's got theological background. Her husband is a pastor, and I think we can probably name her as a pastor for the day here at Bethlehem. So we'll cover all of the bases here. Anyway, what we're looking at today is the monthly mission that we have, and as I said, it's God's Global Barnyard and ELCA World Hunger. On the kiosk out in this narthex there is this blue sheet here that gives you a little bit more background about God's Global Barnyard. But what this is really important for is your commitment. If you decide that this is a program that you'd like to financially support and then to be recognized, because all contributors this year then will be put on the screen in the narthex at Christmas time. And if you've seen the Christmas tree with all of the ornaments, my understanding is that these are for the taking there based upon your commitment, your desired level of commitment. So you can contribute toward chicks here, and we have honeybees, we have cows, we have goats, depending upon what you like to do. We always do this for our two grandsons out in Connecticut. So Amanda is here to tell you all about these two great programs, and hopefully the technology will continue to work, and she is more than willing to entertain questions as we go through the hour that we have. So, without any further delay, Amanda White. Thank you.
Sorry, I get really goofy when things aren't going right. I was a public school teacher for a while, so I had to be, entertaining. So ELCA World Hunger and God's Global Barnyard. I was in worship with you all, and honestly, the children's sermon, I thought, done. I don't have to do it. That's it. Right there. That was awesome. But I'm hoping this will work right. But I just thought I want to share a little bit about who I am and what I do so I can make a connection here. I'm the director for Congregational Generosity. What does that title mean? I only work with congregations, and the majority of mostly all the other people who do fundraising on behalf of all the ministries of the ELCA that I work with have a different kind of portfolio. So I'm kind of the unique unicorn on staff, and it's a lot of fun because I get to go into congregations, do adult forums, preach, and have conversations about world hunger, Lutheran disaster response, global missions, and all those. I'm in the office of the presiding bishop. I live in Waconia, and I'm a member at Faith Lutheran. So it took me about an hour to get here. Most of the staff now works remote for the churchwide office, and I get questions about that a lot because people think that, even in my own church, think I'm driving to Chicago all the time. I'm like, no. COVID shifted that for a lot of people, right? And it did that for churchwide as well. And it gave them the potential to hire people across the country. One of the colleagues I work closest with is in California, and she has a lot of early meetings, but she loves the work. In that picture is my spouse, Adam, and in the front on the left is Olivia, and then Sophia. Sophia is a freshman at Gustavus, and I have to bring that up because I just got to go to Christmas in Christ Chapel. That was incredible. So I come from Nebraska. So this is my first full year. We moved last summer. First 5 years of my life, I was in Wilmer, Minnesota. So my memories are a little vague, but positive. And so when we looked at what our next steps would be, we landed in Waconia. We got a call from the bishop's assistant. Would you consider this place? And so it's been a really happy place, and Minnesotans are great. So it's all the good things I remember. I want to share a little bit about, I don't know if you can see the colors, that's fine. The three expressions of the church, because I think this is also something that, depending on how engaged you are or not, and even if you are engaged, you might not know, you're obviously a congregation, and you have a synod, and I work for Churchwide, and a lot of people just kind of glaze over with that, and that's okay. I didn't know much about it before. I was in campus ministry, which is listed on the green on the right with synods. Often campus ministries are synod serving arms, I think is how a lot of places refer to them. But there's overlap, and there's overlap with call process, there's overlap with YAGM, young adult, a lot of ministries, there's overlap between the three expressions. So that all to say that on the ground, congregations are doing a lot of the work with World Hunger, and in particular here at Bethlehem, your work is with the Barnyard, which is really cool. Anything interesting to you about this shape? Anybody who's been in business or in human resources or... Yeah, there's overlap, right? It's not a triangle. It's not a power thing, like all the power is contained at the top and disseminated, and I think a lot of people think that, but there's a real reliance on the other. And so these all work together. I mean, Churchwide does a lot of the practical things. So do synods and so do congregations, right? So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that next year is 50 years of World Hunger. So I can imagine next year y'all doing something really cool with God's Global Barnyard and 50 years, but we can talk about that, but I just want to bring that up because World Hunger has been in existence since 1974. The predecessor bodies were doing this work. And in 50 years, more than $650 million has been raised to fight against hunger and poverty, providing food, meeting needs, equipping communities, and more recently, we're really working toward sustainability. Across the globe, ELCA World Hunger is at work in 67 countries and 57 synods. That number could be different, but that was as of 2022. We're always kind of after the fact looking at our numbers. Over 3.3 million people were helped last year through ELCA World Hunger across the globe. And so I was thinking about, like, what are the important facts and points to bring up? There is enough food in the world for everyone to be fed, and yet 1 in 9 people, 800 million, face chronic hunger. And the whole statement of what ELCA hunger is about, if the only thing that kind of sticks with you is a just world where all are fed. That's the key thing here. And I learned a lot about why hunger gets tripped up from, if you know Rick Steves. I didn't know Rick Steves a year ago. Do any of you know who that is? The travel blogger writer. He's a Lutheran. So he's really, really big into World Hunger and has done a lot of great things for the Churchwide to help raise awareness. And if this works, I don't know if I'm actually on the internet, but we're going to see if this works. He's talking to the Reverend Anna Burkhart, the Secretary General for Lutheran World Federation, last World Food Day, which is October 16th each year. And in that, he discusses kind of his, what he knows to be true, that conflict in the world trips up hunger and sources of, resources getting to where they need, and that there's all kinds of issues. And so they speak about this. I hope we get to see it. No internet. Bummer. Okay. It's all right. What he talks about is, and I would point out that this is a side note, but this is a person who's traveled so much and is really eloquent at saying hard things about hard situations in ways that don't feel highly political. So I appreciate what he has to say, especially when stuff started breaking out in Israel and Palestine in that situation. He shared a video on Facebook that was really interesting in that it pointed out the facts of the history of what's been going on and interviewed a ton of people. What they get at here is Anna talks about the problems they're having in the world, specifically with women in the economy of food and production. And so I thought, maybe. Now I'm stuck on that. Let's see if I close it. It's acting like there's a dual screen, but there's not. No. Maybe we can just go to the next one. Oh. Yep. Perfect, we're back. Thanks for tech support. Awesome. So what is good, really good about the ELCA World Hunger's approach is working with companions, working in context. Not just coming in and saying, we know how to do it best, here's our program, let's roll it out. They get into these areas and they work with companions, they work with networks of people that live there, that have figured out how to come up with solutions to these challenges. The work includes agriculture and nutrition, water and sanitation, income and savings. They are working toward, there's a lot of work lately in doing like microloans for women, trying to get around some of these areas where there are barriers that the government and just kind of the local laws prevent access to materials. And then, moving on, I wanted to kind of focus on, okay, so why does it matter that women don't have access around the world? Women are responsible for half of the world's food production. I didn't know that. In most countries, they produce 60 to 80% of the food. That's a lot. So if there's so much food, how is it not getting where it needs to go? Well, they get a small fraction of assistance for ag investments because most of the land is owned by men. Many lack access to land, water rights, and livestock. And we know that this is somewhat different here in this country, and we know that farmers here have different concerns and their own struggles with how to markets and prices and all the things that are political and all that, and that's complicated. Some other obstacles are education, access to financial resources like getting credit and loans, and household obligations. Most women in the world are still responsible primarily as caregivers and are not able to do a lot with the food production and have availability to hire other labor. This is a good video too. So if you get a chance, highly recommend. There's a video out. If you go to YouTube, all the ELCA World Hunger videos are logged from like the last 15 years, maybe more. This one's called We Are Chicken Women, and it's about a ministry down in Kentucky. And it's called Manna from Heaven. And there's a congregation in Ohio, so it's right across the border, and they've come in and partnered alongside them, bringing them food. And what they're doing is they are offering people education and chicks, and they are raising animals to provide food source for themselves and are sharing and making income as well. So it's actually an acute food crisis in some areas of the United States, as we know, where there are what people call food deserts. And so Manna from Heaven is just one local United States food, it's not a pantry, it's more like a big giant garden and grocery store. And there are these all over the United States, and it's incredible, highly recommend. But what I think is important to note is there's an education component, its goal is sustainability, and more importantly, it's sharing God's love. Which brings me to God's Global Barnyard. So the gifts to God's Global Barnyard are being used most for livestock, ag, and sustainable development projects. which are helping farmers and families with resources that they need to thrive. So these are all the animals from the, again, the children's sermon was perfect. These are the animals that make the difference. I worked the phones on Giving Tuesday, which was just this week, and we volunteer to help out our call center because they get just inundated with phone calls, which is awesome, because Giving Tuesday had a particular special match. And anyway, I had a lot of great conversations with a lot of people who were giving gifts on behalf of family members, siblings, grandparents, and it was really quite beautiful. That day also was filled with some technical difficulties, but the people, the generosity of Lutherans in this country is incredible. And I invite you to consider this very seriously, what you might give to a family member. I used to think when I was younger, oh great, somebody I barely know gave me a cow. But I think that stuff has a lifelong impact. It's those moments of like when you grow up a little bit, you think, wow, that person was generous. They gave something. My mother's generosity stuck with me, which is what led me to the path I'm on now. So you just never know. So I would love to answer any questions, talk about anything, hear more about the history of God's Global Barnyard here at Bethlehem. I did not know that that was kind of rooted. It usually is. There's somebody who's passionate, a pastor, or somebody that really kind of starts something and makes it grow and people stay with it. Are there any questions about world hunger in general? It's okay if there's not.
Is it just other countries, or is it some of the United States too?
It's both. Yep. They there's international and domestic. About 2/3 of the budget is expensed internationally, and about 1/3 is in the United States. And that number has increased more recently as hunger has become more acute. For a lot of people who do this work, I'm being told, have been doing it for years, don't think of the United States anymore as not the place that needs help. Like for them, it's in some ways not a lot, very different than places we typically think of in our mind. Yeah.
Would you give me kind of, like what happens, I buy a pig.
Yeah.
Okay, so I send the money, what's the step process of how this pig ends up at somebody's house?
Fair question. So some people, and I'm not sure this is necessarily what you're saying, but some people want to know, okay, I want to see the goat I bought. Right, and I don't think that's what you're saying. But some people will call churchwide and ask that. We're like, oh yeah, we don't track that. That would be impossible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what is actually really cool is that because of the relationships that there are other people on staff that they're tending to, is every year we're like, okay, here's the budget, here are all the resources, here are the countries we're in. What happens is that, I can't think of her name. There's a couple people on staff who make those decisions, not just like without decisions with others, but they go to those partners and they say, okay, what's your need? And so then they like bring those needs to us, and then we say, okay, we have, I don't know how many cows, probably thousands and thousands of cows, and then they make those decisions connection by connection. So it's complicated, but because of those people coming to us, because of the relationship, it isn't just, oh, well, we loaded up and, you know, we moved cows from one country to another country because those cows weren't right. It's working with the culture and the places and what they actually already have in place, and then partnering. So yeah, that's kind of a vague answer, but it's very deeply rooted in relationship.
Can you just start it from the other end, so the families who are in need, you know, how do they make that known, and how does that pig get to them, and what
Yeah.
do they have to do before they get one?
Most often it's people that are already in connection with these local ministries. So they're already in relationship, and so these places we're working with already know who those people are. We're able to come in and say, okay, here's the resource. And that's kind of where World Hunger's a little unique in that we have grants that we do. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but there's like the big dream grants that they've been giving out. A lot of them here in the United States are for like food pantries, and there's an application process, and I sat on the board for that. And some of those, like, obviously we're much closer to those, like, geographically, but those ministries and the people who lead them are making those decisions. And if we've, what's the right word? We haven't approved them, but it's it's a relationship built on trust. Like, we're about this, you're about this, we agree. So we trust you when you say these are the 50 people who are in most need right now. Then they just pretty much say, this is how much, and we go, okay, this is how much we have allotted, we can give you. And so it's really based on trust. It's really based on that those people already have functioning ministries and nonprofits and feeding centers that we can participate in. When, kind of a way to understand this, at least for me, how my brain kind of like made the connection was, it's like with Lutheran disaster response, we can't just go in and do whatever we want to do, right? And show up and just, oh, we know best how to do everything. They have to go in and figure out, okay, who are we going to work through in this place? And like when the earthquakes hit in Syria and Turkey, ACT Alliance was there, and that's one of our preferred relationships because we align with them on so many things about how to treat people like humans. And so they were already at work, and so then it's just an issue of us saying, okay, how can we be there? And often, Lutheran Disaster Response and ELCA Hunger partner very closely because hunger is often a part of disaster. So my best understanding is that, and I can look more into this and ask further questions about the process from Dan Rift. I don't know if you've heard that name, but he's been doing ELCA World Hunger fundraising for like 18 years and literally just goes, and I'm like, okay, I'm trying to keep up with you. But a lot of it is just because they're ministries that we've already spent the time to get to know them. It's like how you all here have your relationships with different ministries here in town. You've taken that time, you've gotten to know them, and when they say, this is our need, this is what we're looking for this next year, here's where we're having obstacles, you all can say, well, we can't do everything, but here's what we can do. And that's essentially what ELCA World Hunger does through the God's Global Barnyard. Yes?
I work in the Community and Global Missions group, and I'm just new to that group, but Warner is on that group, and I said, this is such a great mission. And he said, well, you're really not buying a pig. You're really not buying a chicken. That's good. He goes, it's transportation, it's, everything that goes into that. It's just not really that particular.
It could be. It very well could be. But I think what I like about how we do ministry is we say, let's not be so firm that it has to be this. Let's look at the situation and say, cool, we have these pigs, but we have, like you said, we have no way to drive them somewhere. Or these people are in need of immunizations and are all sick, maybe we need to pivot to that first, and then come in and find another partner to say, okay, now let's work on food, let's work on shelter. So it's adaptable, and yet there really are animals going to places. We used to always do this in campus ministry. We would buy a family farm because the students really liked the idea that there was this education component, training that came alongside it, and also the marketing piece so that they would learn skills on how to market so that they could create their own sustaining economy and business. So it's a little bit of both. And some people aren't really, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's hard to say, well, we want to be completely transparent, but that requires adaptability and trust, and that listening to the Holy Spirit, where are we being guided to help people? It's all of that.
So when I write a check to ELCA World Hunger, what happens with that then? Who's monitoring and who's allocating those dollars?
Well, the Office of the Treasurer doesn't hardly let us do anything. I'm just kidding. There are controls, trust me. I don't know if I should be so glib, but like, you do one thing you're traveling and, oh, what's that? Who's there? What did you pay for? It's that. Each program, like World Hunger has their own budget, LDR, Global Missions, all those groups have their own budgets, and they have senior directors whose whole job is to manage it. And so they often think that people like me who go out and fundraise, we're controlling what money they have, and we don't. And that wouldn't be appropriate, right?
Right.
Like if I were to decide if whether or not you have a job and people eat. No, it's totally and completely separate, and that's a good thing. There's a lot of checks and balances. But again, really relying on some of these people who've been doing this work for decades and their connection. We have former missionaries who are now on staff who come back and are working like in Global Missions and helping missionaries like navigate the systems and like, how do I get my visa and how do I connect with congregations, and same thing going on across all these areas. People that are very dedicated to the work. And yes, OT, well, operations is like a hawk on all of it, trying to most responsibly use the funds and steward it, because we do believe that we are stewarding the gifts that God gave us, and so we're trying to be very, very mindful. Yeah, but it's also very exciting work too, and I'm sure they want to say yes to every grant. I sat on that grant process last year, and I tell you the work that's happening across the United States in food ministry, and World Hunger also reaches out into other areas too, because facets of hunger and wellness, mental wellness, all this stuff, spiritual care, it's all interconnected, right? Like people are actually whole humans, and there are like ripple effects when you're hungry, when you don't have work. And there's incredible work happening, and we all would have loved to said yes to all of it, but the key is kind of figuring out where's that balance. But there are definitely controls in place. So, and a lot of people will talk about, and I don't have as long a history as some people do, but they've always kept the admin costs really low. So as low as possible. So there's not like a huge chunk going around, people sit with it, no.
So there are a lot of organizations like ELC, World Hunger, that are attempting to deal with the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Why should we contribute to ELC, World Hunger, as opposed to any of these other groups?
That's a good question.
What do you have to offer that would make me want to write that check?
Oh, that's a great question, because as I myself, coming from campus ministry, I would love to go out and fundraise for campus ministry, and that's not part of the work I do. And so we all are humans that have a lot of interests, right? Things we all care about. Why World Hunger? I think because what I've witnessed in the last year is that it's really rooted in the Lutheran theology and the idea that we're all sinners and saints, we're all the priesthood of all believers, and that there's this idea that people are longing for God's justice, and so they're not shying away from the good news. They're not shying away from Christ, but they're not banging people over the head with it and making them feel like they have to sign up to get it, right? And again, I bring up campus ministry again because I'm seeing direct connections here. When we started the year, there was this big fair. It was at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, so there's like 25,000-ish people in that area. And so all the freshmen come in and they get all excited because they like their free pens and mugs and all this stuff, right? But then you gotta put your email to get something. And it's the kind of what I would call the more of the predator type groups that were like, you have to tell me this, you have to give me this in order to get this. It was never just grace freely given, right? Kind of went against our whole like theology, and so we just stopped doing it because we were like, gross. We'll just go out and evangelize in other ways and connect with people in other ways. And that World Hunger is rooted in that as well. A strong Lutheran idea that we're not going to shy away from who God is and who Jesus Christ is in the new incarnation and the good news, and we're not going to turn you away if you're not Christian. We're not going to say, well, not good enough, we don't like what you have to offer. And I think that's really important in that work, treating people as whole people and bringing that faith component alongside it. And the relationship piece, trusting that others do good work and they're smart too. And we can learn from them. So I think it's all that.
Thank you.
Did that answer that well enough?
Yeah, nice job.
All right.
Good answer.
That was a tough one. Oh, I'm the same though. I'll get online and some friend is doing a fundraiser online for something, and I'll think, my heart strains you.
Yeah.
But you have limited resources, so you have to make decisions, right? And that's tough. And you kind of have to say, okay, this is what I'm going to be about this year or this month or however you do it. But that's my pitch for it, that it's rooted in God's love, but not banging them over the head, making them pay for it, so to speak.
So are world hunger needs increasing, changing? What's like the picture today compared to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago?
So they were really starting to see improvement, if you will. I don't know if I would call it improvement, but the numbers were starting to plateau and even maybe go down a little bit. But it's back on the rise again. And that's a complicated reason. I mean, you've got population explosion still happening, right? But because of COVID, because of global conflict, because of all the things that make life hard, it is becoming a growing problem. And it's getting worse in places like the United States. It's, I think this most recent stat I heard was 1 in 3 people have some type of hunger in the world. Maybe not acute, maybe not ongoing, but face some sort of hunger, and it's getting younger, which is not good. And that's why you see schools and churches trying to support and help. So I started kind of just trying to capture, like, what are the most recent reports, what is the most recent stuff, and it's kind of sad, it's kind of depressing, and it's good work to do, and it's the good news of Jesus Christ, right? And that was kind of what the Secretary General spoke to, was that in 2021, when there was a big report that came out on the state of hunger, and people who paid very close attention to all that, and the trends are very alarmed. So they're excited that World Hunger's pushing through and just trying to, like, with the 50th, we're trying to increase our expenses so we can give out more. So it puts a lot more work on our part, but it's good work. Trying to grow the endowment too, so that we can move towards sustainable financial solutions as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You got good questions. They've all been good. Anything else?
Other questions? Well, Amanda, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
you
Hey,
coming
thanks
and
for
sharing with
your
us.
adaptability to the technological problems, y'all. You guys are great. Thanks.
I want to remind everybody next